Eric Beetner, welcome to Suit Up the Podcast.
Great to see you. Good to be back.
Yes, you are a returning guest and you have returned in a magnificent suit. You look fantastic. I love your shirt, tie, and suit combo. It looks stunning.
Thank you. I do not have an opportunity to wear suits very often, but I have found, in probably the last, I mean, it's been going back 7 or 8 years now. Whenever I go to book conferences or do
Hmm.
book events, I don't necessarily suit up, but I always wear a tie.
Hmm.
I try to be professional and kind of
Yeah.
present myself like I treat it like a job. Because
Hmm.
in my day job, I just rolled from my bedroom down to this is my home office where it's literally I'm in my garage in this little converted space. And in the summer when it gets hot, I'm just sitting here in board shorts and no shoes and I'm just hanging out. So I'm like, no, this is I want to be professional. So I take the opportunity to wear a suit as something that is exciting and new and not a grind. Like, oh God, I got to put on the old monkey suit again.
I actually love that because one thing that I've really been trying to focus on recently with my writing, because I think I fell out of it, was because I work from home, it's really easy. I just throw on like a sweatshirt or
Yeah,
sweatpants and then just move on with my day because it's really easy to do that. I still like getting dressed up when I can. That's why I love doing the podcast. But there's something about that. It's a term called enclothed cognition, where essentially when you put on a certain like type of clothes that you associate with a certain thing, it gives you a new state of mind.
yeah.
When the studies were when someone wore like a white lab coat and were told you're a painter, significantly different than when they wore the same exact white coat but was told you're a doctor. That's a doctor's coat
Interesting.
versus a painter's coat. Just the way that they respond to tests, et cetera, et cetera. So
Huh.
fascinated that exists. I actually am really curious. So like noir at the bar, how what's your like standard? Do you have like a ooh, this is the noir at the bar outfit?
I think again, I always wear a tie. It's usually it's a darker ensemble. I basically
Hmm.
like my whole closet is like I shopped at the Raylan Givens collection. So anything that Timothy Oliphant would have worn on Justified, I have in my closet. So, but yeah, Noir at the Bar is a perfect example of a time when I want to show up like if I'm hosting the event or even if I'm
Hmm.
just a reader in somebody else's event. I want to present myself in a certain way that says, yeah, you took the time to leave your home and come here to listen to us read. I'm going to show you the respect of treating
Hmm.
this like an event.
Hmm. Which I have two questions that lead on that. First is I definitely think Timothy Oliphant could play you in the Eric Beetner movie that we're inevitably going to have in like
Yeah,
just any day now. So
I
I
love it.
want to see that. Timothy, I know you're watching. Give us a call. The other is actually have you to thank for. I went to the Midwest Mystery Writers Conference recently. You
Right.
had plugged me into that. I was just curious, what are, as I want to go to more conferences, what are your go-to, these are the book conferences that mystery and thriller writers should attend or
Well,
attempt to attend?
I've been a long time attendee of Baoshikon, which is sort of
Hmm.
it's kind of the grandfather of crime and mystery writing events, and they always do a great job. They pick wildly different locations.
Hmm.
I have not been able to go every year. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it this year. It's up in Calgary, which actually kind of
Yeah.
is a bummer because I would like to go that. I've done that 12 times, 13 times now. Always a good time. So I think if, especially for newer writers who are looking to
Hmm.
break in, make those contacts, just connect with other, writers and authors that you really admire because they get a ton of
Hmm.
the biggest names in the game. So
Hmm.
it's a great place to sort of rub shoulders with that. Thriller Fest in New York is a little bit it's more expensive because
Hmm.
A, it's in New York and it just is. And that's much more geared towards writers than writers slash readers conference like
Hmm.
VoucherCon is. I'm also a big fan of left coast crime, which always
Hmm.
happens somewhere on the West Coast. It's left coast. It's sort of basically anything west of the Mississippi kind of counts. But they always do a great show, and it's a little less traveled, so it's a little bit smaller than VoucherCon, but not by much. It's
Hmm.
very respectable. And then there's a few that I've never been to that I always hear great things that are maybe a little more, genre specific. There's, Killer Nashville always
Hmm.
sounds like a great time.
My great
There's
regret is I didn't go to the Killer Nashville Boucher Con because didn't they like pair
that was
them
a good
that
one.
one year?
I don't think they weren't paired. It was in
Okay.
Nashville, and that was a good time. That was such a wild location too. That hotel
Oh,
that they were in
Nashville.
it was bizarre. There's Malice Domestic, which is on the sort of cozier side of
Hmm.
things. So if you're into that and write or read those kind of things, that one's great. And then yeah, I am a huge fan of the Midwest Mystery Conference in Chicago
Hmm.
that Lori Rader Day and a lot of her compatriots there have built over the years. I was
Hmm.
so fortunate in their inaugural year. For the first 3 years, I got to MC that event,
Oh, that's so awesome.
which was so much fun. They've moved away from a sort of an overall MC thing,
Hmm.
and I was ready to do my fourth year when the pandemic hit, and then
Yeah.
that whole thing fell apart. But they have built a really really great one day single track
Hmm.
conference that is worth making the trip to Chicago for. Because again, they get great writers. It's a lot
Hmm.
of big names that you get exposed to a lot of new voices,
Hmm.
and that's always my biggest takeaway from a conference is going away like not necessarily seeing the people that I've read and are already on my shelf, but I want to find out who is new and who is upcoming and who
Hmm.
really intrigues me that I want to discover their work. That's the most exciting thing about a conference for me.
Hmm. Well, I think that that's so awesome because it really is an opportunity to see what is coming down the pipeline and what the conversations are, the themes.
Yeah.
Midwest Mystery Writers Conference, say that 10 times fast, was an absolute blast. I got to go with Jeff Circle. It was a lot of fun. Highly recommend it to people. Um,
Yep.
BoucherCon is going to be in DC next year, which has me both, ooh, that sounds amazing, and also that sounds like a nightmare. So I'm excited it's coming to Indianapolis in I think 2 years, and I think that's the one I'm gonna try hitting.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. 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 DC, we'll see. It's entirely possible that might just be a flaming pit in the ground by then, but
That's true.
you don't know.
Never know. Speaking of the state of things, a wound that will not heal. Oh my goodness. I have my review for it was that it's stunning, it's amazing, it's almost too realistic to read. So you wrote an incredible book. Tell us about what happened to come into that book. And it's the third Carter McCoy novel, the final one. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it was this was a unique experience for me because I had an outline, I had a storyline
Hmm.
that I was going to send Carter into this, what I always knew it was the final book. It was always a
Hmm.
trilogy from the beginning. So there were certain parameters that I knew I had to stick to, and I was working with my outline and I was about to start writing,
Hmm.
and I just said, "You know what? My bad guys aren't bad enough."
Hmm.
It was a whole different set of antagonists that he was going up against, and I said, it's just not it what wasn't didn't feel right." And
Hmm.
I'm not a super political writer. I mean, I have my opinions and I'm not shy about them and social media and everything. I'm decidedly liberal. I live in LA. I am absolutely a liberal California. We drink oat milk. I
Hmm.
embrace that. I drive a Prius. It's the whole thing. But I don't want to, as you
Yeah.
say, I don't want to turn people off with
Hmm.
politics in a book. I don't want
Hmm.
to write a screed. I don't want to be anti this or pro
Hmm.
that on the page unless it's true to the characters,
Hmm.
if it fits the story. So when I was having doubts about my own story, I had to
Hmm.
think, what is something that I feel needs to be commented on, I feel is
Hmm.
important in the world today, and something that Carter McCoy would share those same feelings. Someone that because a lot of what Carter goes through throughout the three books is he finds this ability with his impending death, and I'll just sort of take it
Yeah.
as an assumption that people sort of know the general things about Carter McCoy, and if you don't, take 5 minutes and go look it up. But
We have
so
another
he's
interview linked in the show
yeah,
notes. Go listen to that one.
exactly. Go to the first one. But so he knows his time is short, and
Yeah.
he can help people by
Hmm.
seeking justice on their behalf. And so
Hmm.
but he also struggles with that. He's not a violent person by nature. He's not someone who seeks out
Hmm.
conflict and he's not on the hunt to go kill people. But if he
Hmm.
sees something that is bad enough that he feels justified to step in, then that makes it worth his time and effort in his last remaining days on Earth. So that was another thing. It's like who is important enough and who is bad
Yeah.
enough out there to make him motivated enough to do these things. So what I ended up doing was the bad guys that he faces are these sort of wannabe ICE agent guys
Hmm.
who are feeling empowered by the current administration, the current state of politics. And I also I made it a point like I never say the current president's
Hmm.
name. I don't make it.
Hmm.
You know,
You
I
do a
try not.
great job of doing two things here,
Thank
which
you.
I think is important in writing crime fiction, especially timely and timeless, where
Okay, good.
this is something that addresses today, but can work regardless of when you pick it up. Because it
That's
does
the
have a
hope.
quality, especially with the wannabe ICE agents, where it reminds me of Elmore Leonard in a lot of
Mm,
senses, where you get those, for lack of a better term, those like Floridian redneck characters that pop up in
yeah.
some of his books, where they're like, they think they are the smartest person in the room and
Right.
they've got the perfect plan and they're talking to Billy Joe Bob about how they are going to pull off this great heist. And I
Yep.
think you do a great job of straddling that line.
Thank you. And that was the struggle is like I didn't want to write caricatures.
Hmm.
I didn't want to write something that was just insulting to an entire
Hmm.
swath of America. And yet, which I think that's part of the reason too, where it's, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that some of the guys who are involved in this start to see cracks in their
Hmm.
own motivation for what they're doing.
Hmm.
And I wanted to play into that too. I wanted to show these guys is they're not just one-dimensional evil.
Hmm.
They've been wrapped up in this thing that I think a lot of Americans right now have been caught up in. And in the last couple of months, I think you see a lot of people are seeing the scales fall from their eyes and seeing, maybe we bought into this a little too soon, or maybe maybe we're not the good. I don't know if you've ever seen this that British sketch, the Mitchell and Webb look.
No.
It was a British sketch show. I mean, this is probably 15 years ago now, but they did such a fabulous sketch where it opens. It's World War II, and it's a bunch. It's Nazis
Yeah.
and they're on the fronts, and it sort of pans in, and one guy says to the other, the officer says, I've been thinking the logos on our hats, they're skulls and crossbones." And the guy's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Are we the bad guys?" And it's sort of like a moment of realization, like all this stuff that is apparent to everybody else. He's sort of like, "Huh, maybe we're
Hmm.
not on the right side of history."
Hmm.
So,
We recently had the opportunity to interview Beau L'Amour, Louis L'Amour's son. They're coming out with a great book, a thriller called Skyring Water. And in it, there's a wonderful moment where it's like set in the 1960s. And so you have this former Nazi scientist
oh
that is
wow,
involved in the story, and they have to pair up with a Mossad agent.
oh wow,
And his point, he has a wonderful chapter where he's just like, listen, everything changed overnight for you. For us, the water just slowly started getting warmer day by day.
yeah,
And I think that that's both a positive and negative thing that we can take into account for just the United States in general. Let's just go with history itself.
right,
There is it's easy for things to just slowly change. The good thing about that is it also gives the opportunity to catch the change and notice and ask questions. And thankfully, we are, for whatever comparisons we can also make, this is not Germany in the 1940s, which means we have the opportunity to always go, well, question what's happening,
right,
regardless of political opinions.
right,
And I think that that's one of the good things about America, honestly. And I think that that's one of the things I have to give you credit for is a wound that will not heal has hope in it. And
good,
that I think is a really important thing today is as we record this, it is Superman Day. And I was thinking like the cool thing about Superman is that as a character, he's supposed to embody hope. And when you think about truth, justice, and the American way,
yeah,
that's what it's supposed to be. Is this optimism for, but we have the ability to choose oftentimes.
absolutely.
Not in every circumstance, but in most circumstances, we have the ability to choose.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that came through because I want to try to both live my life as an optimistic person and write those kind of stories. I mean,
Hmm.
I've read enough books that you get to the end and you just, oh man, it was just a bummer. It might be real life, but oh, it didn't make me
Hmm.
feel good. Or
Hmm.
I think there's definitely a way to depict real world scenarios and
Hmm.
have your story and your characters be realistic
Hmm.
and yet not bleak.
Yes. Well, and that's also just a tough line when it's the final Carter McCoy novel because
Right.
we know what's going to happen. It is the memento mori. And I think that that's one of the interesting things I think you've gotten to do with Carter is that he's a character who lives in the acknowledgement of what his fate is. That's something we all live with. We just don't
Right.
acknowledge it. And we that's the tough thing. And it's interesting because he sits within that archetype of the shootist. And we may have mentioned this in the
Mm.
last interview, but because he knows he's going to end. Except the
Yeah.
difference is he's not a man who has lived a life of violence before this.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I'm sure there's a lot to be sort of analyzed in my own life. I mean, since the first book to now, my own father passed away.
My
There
condolences.
have been, you get to a certain age and people
Hmm.
start falling away from your life. So, the mortality is always there. But I think, you know, setting out at the beginning of this trilogy, knowing that the end is foretold, it was both a challenge and a little bit freeing, I think, because I
Hmm.
didn't have to wonder what the end was. I say that, and yet I have not rewritten a scene more as many times in my entire 35 plus books than I did the final scene in this book.
Hmm.
I wrote it and I rewrote it and I tweaked it and I adjusted and I had to make
Hmm.
sure, oh, I hope I got this right, and I'm still not entirely sure.
What was it like kind of saying goodbye to him after the three books?
It was it was weird because I don't want to say it was sad because
Yeah.
I felt that I told his story. It was also the first, like I've done a couple of trilogies now. This is, I think, my fourth trilogy.
Hmm.
And yet, this is the first time that I didn't write any other novels in between. Other
Hmm.
trilogies, I would write something, I would go write something else, I would come back to it.
Hmm.
In two cases, I came back to it years later. So this was, these three now there were short stories in between. I think there was one novella that got in there, but it was living with this character and with this overall story arc
Hmm.
consistently for a long time. So that part was, I guess, the bittersweet part was just that it was when it's on your mind for that long, and then you
Hmm.
have to let it go. And in a way, like I haven't. I haven't written a new novel since the end of this one, and part of it is I just have to like shift my mindset. I like, oh God, I got to write something new. I got to start all new characters. Oh man.
Well, okay, this is actually a valid question for me to ask because I've I've been writing my Mitch Mayhew novellas, and then I threw in a different little short historical fiction thing in between. And I'm working on now the third one, third Mitch Mayhew, and it's hard to like shift my gears a little bit. Do you have any
Hmm.
advice or what has worked for you when you are moving from project to project, when it's like interrupting a continuing character?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, well, first go back and reread your own work, which
Hmm.
can sometimes feel self-torturous, but it gets you back in that mindset.
Hmm.
I think if you I'm assuming that you're going to be a little bit like me, which is like if that idea is bubbling in the back of your head
Hmm.
and telling you it's time, then you're already halfway there. Because if Mitch is already talking to you, if the story is already there wanting to be told,
Hmm.
then it really is. Then it just becomes, I think, a game of momentum. Because a lot of times, like the book there was such a big gap. Like I
Hmm.
wrote the first two in this book, and then they got picked up for re-release, and they wanted to add a third book. So I ended up going back into this set of characters, and it had been, I think, 5 years,
Oh
four
wow.
or five
Hmm.
years. But it was the same kind of thing where like I was nervous, and then once I just started typing, and once I got into that, like it was a chapter down, two chapters in, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And the momentum of actually doing it got
Hmm.
me right back into who these guys were and this character and that world that I had already created because it still lives within you. But when you're inventing people and scenarios and their lives and everything, all it's a part of you.
Yeah.
So it might be
You have a whole
buried kind of deep.
multiverse in your head.
Yeah, it's under there. You just have to unearth it. But once you get under there, it's there and waiting to hopefully welcome you back.
That's fantastic. You mentioned short stories briefly, and I do want to ask because show friend Jeff Circle edited Myopic Duplicity,
Yeah.
and you had a short story in there called Sisters. Tell me kind of what went into that, what went into that short story.
Well, the sort of the brief on that one was stories of people who make moral choices that they're convinced are right, but the reader might maybe would question their motivations. Uh, I have three sisters. I'm the only boy in the family.
Wait, I have to ask then, where do you sit in those three
I
sisters?
I have an older sister who's like a year and a half older than me, and then I have two younger half sisters who are much younger. They were
Okay.
both born when I was in college, so
Okay.
there's a huge gap.
Hmm.
So I spent most of my life being the baby of the family, and then all of a sudden became an older brother in my 20s. So it's been a strange dynamic. So I feel like I've sort of gotten a flavor of both sides, but not to say that the sisters in this story are based at all on my own sisters,
Quick
but
qualifier there.
yeah, but I do love the idea of
Hmm.
family bonds
Hmm.
that so many people take that notion of like, well, your family, we do anything for family,
Hmm.
and they just sort of take it as a given. And then when they're actually pushed, you discover the limits of like, well, okay, I mean, we're related, but what do I really owe you? And what have you done for me? And like, is this a
Hmm.
reciprocal relationship? And so I wanted to explore all of those kind of things of like a very out of balance relationship between these two sisters. And one is always helping the other, and one is always getting her out of a jam. And then she gets in a jam that's just a step too far. And it's like, all right, I have to I had to either wash my hands of this or we're both going down together. So
Hmm.
that was sort of where that one came from. And I was pleased with the way it turned out. And then it's the audio reading of that
Yes.
whole collection I thought was fantastic. The narrator on that just did a great job.
Myopic Duplicity has been so much fun. Just the all the assortment, fantastic writers, all
Yeah.
incredible stories, all. I come from a large family. I have a lot of siblings, and I always appreciate when I see family dynamics on the page and it clicks. Like you've probably read where clearly someone writes about siblings and you're like, "Oh, they do not have siblings. They are an only child."
Well, I should say, I mean, I don't consider like we're not a super tight family. Again,
Hmm.
like my older sister, we grew up together, and we grew up with a single dad. You would think that we would be bonded by our trauma, if anything, but we live very separate lives, and
Hmm.
we enjoy each other's company, and we like each other, and all is well. And then my younger sisters, it's I didn't grow up in the same house
Yeah.
with them, so it's going to be a little bit of a different kind of relationship. I love them all, and they're all wonderful people. But yeah, I don't have that. I don't think if any of my sisters had to bury a body, I wouldn't be the one they would call. You know what
You're
I
the
mean?
crime writer, and they wouldn't reach out to you to ask, well, how do I get rid of a body?
They would be smart too, but maybe they would. I don't know. But so I am actually fascinated by the dynamic that I'm not that familiar with, which is that thing of like I've seen too many people be like, well, he's my brother. Well, I got to do everything. I'm like, but
But
like
why?
why? Like what? He's an asshole. Why? You don't have to ruin your life on his behalf. So I'm fascinated by that dynamic. I mean, that's so much of my writing is writing about people that are not in my world because
Hmm.
I want to know about them. I'm interested in
Hmm.
things outside of my own experience. I mean, that's how I ended up a crime writer. I am the most boring guy in the world. I've never been arrested. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I am complete middle of the road in every way. So when I write about criminals and drug addicts and murderers and all this stuff, it's to be like I want to reach for a life that's very different from my own. So
I'm curious, is there a type of crime or class of criminal that you haven't written about yet that you're like, ooh, that would be interesting to learn more about?
that's a good question. The stuff that I've avoided so far, I've avoided because it doesn't like I would never write about a serial killer.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
that
Hmm.
just doesn't really interest me. Or,
Hmm.
and I've always said like I've written about I've written hitmen but I would never write the world's greatest assassin.
Hmm.
I would never. I think I'm drawn to the guys and the women who are either, new at the job or maybe not the best at the job. They're not. I would never write about the greatest, safe cracker. But I'm more interested in the guy who just started last week, or the guy who got pulled in and doesn't really want to be there into a heist or a crime, or somebody who's forced into a life of criminality by extenuating circumstances. I think somebody who's under that kind of pressure is just a much more interesting character to me than
Yeah.
someone who chooses a life and is great at it. There's something very appealing about a James Bond type
Hmm.
and everything, but I don't think I would be very good at writing that. But that is interesting. If that, I'm sure there's got to be something out there that I haven't tackled yet that it would be fun to learn about and to read about. And a lot of that, sometimes it comes down to gender. Like
Hmm.
I've written first person female, and that's always interesting to sort of take on a
Hmm.
different persona in that way. Um, it's nerve-wracking because you want to get it right. You want to be respectful, and you don't want to write something that makes the readers who have lived that experience go, "Oh, this is bullshit." And this guy is obviously an only child, or this guy's never had his period, so how does he know all that kind of stuff? So
Hmm.
that's where doing your research and everything definitely comes in. So yeah, I think I'm interested in. Now I want to go find that next thing. You've inspired me, Terrence.
Oh, well, hey, that's what the Soup podcast is to help stoke the flames of creativity. Speaking of James Bond, I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about the Bond books as a concept, and something I've tried to introduce in my writing is most of Fleming's books take place around a type of commodity as his MacGuffin.
Hmm.
Gold, diamonds, in the case of Dr. No, guano. Like it's the
Yeah.
supply chain that inevitably requires Bond to intervene. And I think that if you look at a lot of books, even crime fiction, there
Hmm.
is some kind of type of crime or class of criminal, or there's the MacGuffin that draws to the plot or concept
Yeah.
is it's drugs, alcohol, like pick whatever the vice is, and
Yeah.
that's what creates the story.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, all of those criminal enterprises are you could take the drugs or the vice out of it and set it in a corporate world, and
Hmm.
it would be the same story. It's just as cutthroat, and the motivations are the same. If like someone in a corner office, what are
Hmm.
they going after? They want to get rich. So does the drug dealer on the street corner. So the motivation is the same. And especially when you're talking crime fiction, your motivation is going to be greed, lust, power.
Hmm.
That's kind of it. So you can
The
take that
Holy
and
Trinity, oh, unholy Trinity.
go exactly. See, you can place those motivations into almost any scenario, and you're gonna end up with the same driving forces behind your characters. So yeah,
Talking with you, you're stoking my flames of creativity. I'm like, oh darn, I need to work on something like that. Have I written a book where the entire premise is like he's lustful and that's how he gets into the thing?
I, how, how many times has that been the downfall of so many characters? I mean, look, James Cain made an entire career on it.
Okay, so on that note, I'll ask you, since I think you're a subject matter expert, for someone that is interested in getting into noir fiction, what are the essential like texts? Because film noir obviously is like the where we get the term noir, et cetera, et cetera. And a
Right.
lot of the books were either written in almost because of that, or they were written before and then like just had those traits. But I'm curious, like from your perspective, what are the essential noir texts that someone should read?
Yeah, I do recommend going back to the beginning, and noir fiction came out of the 1930s. Noir
Hmm.
film started in the 40s, and many of the most famous adaptations were taken from those early 30s novels, which I think a lot of people are trepidatious to dig into something that's that old because it's gonna feel creaky and it's gonna
Hmm.
be, whether it's misogynistic or whatever fears they have of it. If you read Double Indemnity, if you read Postman Always Rings Twice, they are as modern today
Hmm.
as they were then because the motivation is greed and lust, and
Hmm.
it's these universal things that do not change. So, and it's the reason why people are still writing books with essentially the same plots, and you're constantly updating it because those core human desires never change.
Hmm.
So I'm always a big fan of going back to those originals. And if you're going to talk noir, noir and hardboiled are always
Yes.
being conflated. And so I think a lot of people would point to Raymond Chandler. I think you're better off saving the PI stuff
Hmm.
for later if you want to know noir.
Hmm.
So there are a couple. Obviously, the James. There's Double Indemnity. There's Postmodern Dreams Twice. There's is a book called Hell Hath No Fury by Charles Williams, which was
Oh,
then later became the Hot Spot.
okay.
Uh, that is one of the deepest noir and greatest noir novels I've ever read. There's a book called Fool's Gold by Dolores Hitchens, which is you can't believe it's as old as it is. Like you're like this feels incredibly modern. Same thing. There's a book called Do Evil in Return by Margaret Millar, who was one of the real great practitioners of noir novels. That is, I want to say it's early 40s. I'd have to check the date on it, but like it deals with. It's a very feminist book. It's a very
Hmm.
forward-thinking book. It's about a woman's right to choose. It's all of these things wrapped up in
Hmm.
this very noirish novel. That's really great. I'm a big fan of a writer Lionel White.
Okay.
He wrote a book called Clean Break, which was turned into a film noir called The Killing, directed by Stanley Kubrick, which is one of my
Okay.
favorites.
That's why I've heard of it before. Somewhere in the back of my brain, I was like, Lionel White is like ringing a bell here.
Yeah, he's got so many great ones. William P. McGivern is one of my favorites. McGivern is sort of the king of the crooked cop novel,
Hmm.
and he has what I think is probably the greatest run of film noir adaptations. He wrote a book that then became films of The Big Heat,
Oh.
Rogue Cop, Shield for Murder. He wrote a novel called The Darkest Hour, which was turned into a film of a different title. But the book Darkest Hour is a fantastic noir novel. So yeah, I always direct people towards stuff that is not the PI, not the
Hmm.
detective stuff, because I think that leans more hard boiled and
Hmm.
and then you start to get into the more modern stuff. There's fantastic. Now, my favorite little niche subgenre within noir. I don't know why, but I love like guy finds a bag of money and has to decide what to do with it. And it's like a whole subgenre on its own. There are tons of books with that basic kicking off point, and I love them all. There's a Simple Plan by Scott Smith. The Cold Kiss by John Rector is just such a fantastic
I
novel
love
that,
that title.
that's such a great book. Rector's such a great author. But yeah, those kind of stories that that make you think, what would I do in that situation?
Hmm.
And every single time it just goes so badly for these people. Like if I found a bag of money on the street tomorrow, the last thing in the world I would ever do is try to keep it because I've read enough of these books to know that this is gonna end badly.
There are two choices you can make in that scenario, and the one to keep it always leads to worse decisions.
Every time. My favorite thing about the cold kiss, which I think is one of the best practitioners of that, is there are it's an escalating
Hmm.
story of, but if we just get over this one little obstacle, there's a tiny obstacle in our way. If we just clear that, we're free. And they clear that, and then there's something, and it's okay, but it's just this one. It's not. We have to scale this 100-foot wall that
Hmm.
it's standing in our way. It's a series of really tiny obstacles that they can just self justify. Okay,
Hmm.
this is the last thing. If we just do, and Oh, it's chef's kiss. It's so good.
Well, and okay, you do implement some of that in A Wound That Will Not Heal, as the wannabe ice agents are keep going. We just need to get over this. We just need to get this, and then we can keep moving forward. And it just keeps not happening, which I think, honestly, that is something that all writers should just like. I was recently looking over just conversations with writers online because, of course, writers talk online. And on this particular Discord, it was a conversation about like how does there need to be a twist? Does there need to be a reversal in a story? And I was like, not really, but there needs to be constant tension. You need to have the
Yeah,
midpoint. You need to have the and a reversal. Those are two things that really should be in a story to keep tension, and it's just good structure.
yeah,
Any story needs to have that constant building of tension, and it doesn't have to be with huge things. It doesn't need to be the world is about to end. It just
right.
needs to be, oh, they made the wrong decision, and they just keep
Right.
getting a little bit farther and a little bit farther, and you see the impending doom.
Well, I think the other thing that goes hand in hand with that, and that I tried to do in this book, and I try to do in all of my work, is that I think you need to make your antagonists as interesting and as complicated as your
Hmm.
protagonist. I think
Hmm.
if the hero of your story is constantly overcoming obstacles, but the villain of the story is smooth sailing, then every time you cut away to the villain of the story, it's kind of filler.
Hmm.
So if there's complications on both sides of the fence, I think that's much more interesting for the reader.
Hmm. Well, and it's more realistic to life. Like, how often do we go through a day and it just goes according to plan? And we're
Right.
not trying to commit crimes.
Exactly. I'm just trying to get groceries, damn it. Like, how is this so hard?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that as a thought and 100% going to start implementing it more as I write.
It's important. And I think because look, how many times have we seen the the biggest takeaway from a story is
Hmm.
sometimes the villain.
Hmm.
Like we all talk about Hannibal Lecter. We don't talk
Yes.
about Clarice Starling, right?
That's fair.
I mean that there is something to be said that your villain is often just inherently the more interesting character.
Hmm.
So you have to give them interesting things to do, and you have to put obstacles in their way. That's not just I don't want to get caught by,
Hmm.
the good guys pursuing me or whatever that is. They have to have a three-dimensional complicated life as well.
Hmm. I I love that because it feels like far often it goes one way or the other, where the villain becomes so bland they're just snidely whiplash, twisting their mustache,
Right.
blank as cardboard, or they are too sympathetic to the point of, well, they're not compelling as a bad guy at that point. They
Yeah.
still have to be deliciously evil potentially, or at least just, oh dear goodness, why are you doing something so stupid? Which is, quite frankly, again, like a great comparison here to what you did with Elmore Leonard, having bad guys who have complicated inner lives and are trying to get a goal that they have justified makes it
Mhm.
far more interesting and compelling, especially when they're getting you have a good section where you see some of the guys are getting deeper and
Yeah.
darker and others are like maybe this isn't the best move, and that contrast between the characters makes it more interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that all that lands is that was definitely a part of what I was trying to do is make those guys not just cartoons and make
Hmm.
them not blanketly evil, but give them a little bit of dimension because I think and that's part of the reason why I've never been drawn to like the comics world and stuff. Like I don't find
Hmm.
someone like a Lex Luthor that interesting of a guy
Hmm.
because I don't think that there's a lot of dimension there, and and
Hmm.
and it works for those types of stories where it is those stories are set up to be very black and white, good
They're literally
versus
supposed to be
evil.
two dimension.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's yeah, you're right. It's literally your flat drawings on a page. Here you go. It doesn't need to be more than that. But I think if you're going to ask a reader to invest in 300
Hmm.
pages of your story, you have to give them characters with a lot more of an inner life.
Hmm. Taking a bit of a left turn here.
Yeah.
You work in editing. I'm genuinely curious. What were your thoughts on the editing awards at the Oscars this last year? Did you have a front runner favorite? Did the one you wanted to win? I'm genuinely curious on your thoughts.
All right. You're going to make me look up who was even nominated.
I have the
You
list
have
here.
it? Okay. 'Cause I
Are
am so bad these I don't pay attention as much as I should anymore. The one of I will say this, one of the only times that I have had really, really strong feelings, and
Mhm.
I was going to be really mad if it didn't win, was when Mad Max Fury Road was
Oh.
nominated for editing, because I was like, well, that if that doesn't win, what are we all doing? And bless their hearts, they made the right choice, and that won because that was a monumental achievement in screen action that it should be studied for centuries.
I still feel awful because I haven't seen it. It's like
Oh
supposed to
my
be one of the
Lord.
best action movies ever. And I just haven't watched it because I'm not a car guy. So like I was when I heard it's a film about them going one place and then the other, I wasn't that interested. But literally every conversation about it since has been no, no, no. As a film, this is one of the
Yeah.
best movies ever.
No, I mean, I thought it was great on kind of every level, but yeah, just if you're at all interested in the technical process and just a masterclass in
Hmm.
action editing, which I know is not going to land for most people, it's because editing it's tricky because it's so much of it is unseen and
Hmm.
unrecognized. You're not supposed to notice it, which is great. And that's the brilliant thing about this film is that you don't notice it.
Hmm.
And but part of what is hidden is the fact that there is, because you're right, it's a giant car chase. That's that's the movie. It's like you're like 8 minutes in and they're already on the road and we got an hour and a half to go. But the fact that there is so much going on, it's
Hmm.
constantly in motion. There are so many characters, and you never lose track of where you are, who's in what vehicle, who's at risk, who's it's yeah, just trust me, it's great.
I will say, so since our first interview together, I have paid more attention to the editing in movies, and it genuinely amazes me how big a difference that makes to when I can now say it's the editing when I walk out of a movie and I'm like, wow, just so slow and boring. I can pick up on it's because the editing was kind of sucky.
Yeah.
And when I feel like the film is more fast paced and interesting, I go, oh, well, because it's because the editing was a little bit more clear cut, no pun intended there.
Yeah.
An example actually of that is one of the key nominees was F1 for this last year, which
Yep.
again, car movie. I don't find car chases inherently interesting as per previous conversation, but I walked out of that movie going, whoa. It is the simplest, not dumbest, but simplest, most straightforward reinterpretation of Top Gun Maverick on a like circle
Yeah.
possible. It's not that interesting, but the way it's filmed and the editing and the pacing, along with having charismatic actors, brought a very bland script to absolute life.
Yeah. No, I thought that film was very well cut. Um, I would put Ford versus Ferrari a
I
notch
haven't
above it.
seen it.
If
Again,
because
I need to.
there are it's one of those rare instances where you can kind of do apples to apples because there's so
Hmm.
much race
Yes.
footage. And I think the race footage in Ford versus Ferrari is superior. I
Hmm.
mean, it's shades of gray, but yeah, if you haven't seen Ford versus Ferrari, I think that's a really it's an interesting film. There's a lot of great there's just great characters in that one, and the
James
race footage
Mangold
is yeah.
very rarely disappoints me in
No,
a
he's
film.
so good. Yeah. What
The
else was nominated this year?
the other nominees were Marty Supreme, Sentimental Value, Sinners, and then One Battle After Another was the one that actually won.
Yeah, which okay, I applauded that. I thought One Battle was great because look right here on my desk, right in front of me. I don't know if you can read that.
Hey, yes. Yes, I heard it says make movies shorter for those
Yep.
in the listening audience. I heard that it was not a terribly long movie.
It's a very long movie.
Oh, it
It
is?
doesn't feel like a long movie. It's 2:30. It's like 2:34 or something like that.
Two
But it
hours and 42 minutes. Holy
yeah,
cow.
I which I see that runtime before I know anything about a movie and I go, "Oh, come on." I I was in the whole time. Like, look, could I take 20 minutes out of that movie? Sure.
Yeah.
But everything that I said, well, you know what, you actually don't really need that. I was like, but it's still a great scene.
Hmm.
Like, could you cut it out? Yeah. But it did not feel like a slog at all in that film. And it's not like super high octane action in the
Hmm.
action sequences, but there is just something about the pacing that they do. It has very unique musical score that I think really worked to its advantage, and kind of carried us through a couple of scenes that
Hmm.
could have felt overlong. But yeah, I really supported that win. Because and look, you compare the editing in that to something like Sentimental Value, which is people talking.
Yeah.
You
Slightly
know, it's
different types of editing there.
it really is, and it's that's editing. It becomes one of the most difficult categories, I think, to really objectively evaluate. Because you can look at the cinematography of Sinners and go,
Hmm.
well, look at how gorgeous
Yeah.
this film is, and I can see where that can be an award-winning thing. Like
Hmm.
you just it's easy to see pictures and say,
Yes.
yeah, of course that.
That just looks
But
beautiful.
right, but it a trickier task to edit, of a car chase or a
Hmm.
shootout than
Hmm.
it is to edit a really compelling conversation between people. And there's an argument to be say like, well, yeah, people sitting around and talking is much more difficult to make
Hmm.
edge of your seat compelling
Yeah.
than a guy with a gun. So it becomes a really tricky category to evaluate when there is that disparate
Hmm.
of choices to be made. But yeah, I did go right along with One Battle as the winner. I supported that.
You're actually making me think about how one of the reasons I actually think Jane Austen might be one of the best writers of all time, just because her entire books are people sitting and talking. Nothing
Yeah,
actually happens, but because of the way she layers humor, character, and irony in the stories, and
yeah,
the way it's just the perspectives, literally the editing on the page of this person, as the reader, this information from this other character that the others don't know, it does keep the story interesting and compelling, even though it's people sitting around and talking. And the stakes are marriage, not the world is about to
right.
end. Will they be embarrassed at the ball? Oh.
Yeah, yeah. It's a tricky thing to pull off when you can do it. Is that thing of depicting real life
Hmm.
and having it be exciting, like do I want to step out of my real life to read about somebody else's real life?
Hmm.
And I mean, obviously that's why crime and thrillers are such a huge genre, and people like or something like, Project Hail Mary. Like, I want to read about a guy who's, in the most extreme situation you can even imagine, versus, yeah, somebody who's like, oh my God, is she going to be happy or not? Is she going to find love? But at the same time, like, I don't know what it feels like to be, 100 light years from home, but I know what it's like to wonder, am I going to be happy? So
Uh,
art is so great.
Art is so great. Like went from Jane Austen to Project Hail Mary in like a sentence, and those are very different types of things. But I love that at the core of it, it's good storytelling. And oh my goodness, Project Hail Mary, it I walked out of the movie going, does Amazon know that this is an Oscar contender for a variety of different categories yet?
Oh,
Just
yeah.
because it's, oh my goodness, amazing. So excited.
Yeah, no, they're going to win a ton of stuff. One of the most sort of impactful
Hmm.
power of art things that I've experienced in a long time happen recently. And it was after the Artemis 2 mission.
Hmm.
Uh, I think a lot of us were really compelled by that because we just needed some good news in the world, and it was reassuring to see
Hmm.
both the human achievement and
Hmm.
everyone on that crew seemed like genuinely good people. And the
Hmm.
fact that it was this diverse crew of experts who from all walks of life who were, kind of almost a rejection of a lot of the stuff that they're trying to,
Hmm.
make illegal. But again, not to be political about it, just but to
Hmm.
get back to the art of it is it. I don't know if you saw when they named that crater
No, I
after
didn't.
they they got to see up close a couple of things that hadn't been named yet. I guess they
Hmm.
name every crater on the moon, but there's so many that they got to name a couple of features, and one of this crater that you can see with the naked eye because it's like a little white spot. You can see it without a telescope or anything. It hadn't been named yet, and so the crew decided they wanted to name it after one of their crew members whose wife passed away from
Oh.
cancer. So they named it
Hmm.
Carol. And it
Oh.
was this really sweet moment where you saw that. And after that, there was, and I apologize, I'm not going to know their names, but there was some people just on TikTok or whatever who, were singer-songwriters, and they saw this and they said, "Oh my God, that's so lovely!" And they wrote a song about it, and it's called Carol. I'm sure you can find it because it's gone viral, and it's just this beautiful
Hmm.
song about this moment, about these people that they don't know, but just about this lovely little moment and this little love story. But I was so moved by this because I mean, not only is it a great song, but it was people seeing something beautiful, and
Hmm.
the only way they could react to it and kind of communicate about it was through their art.
Hmm.
And their art is writing songs. So it was like they were so moved by something they saw, they had to then create art from it. And there was
Hmm.
something about that relationship that just hit me so deeply of like that is the beauty of any artist is seeing something that they become so taken with and so overwhelmed with that it
Hmm.
makes them pick up a guitar, pick up a paintbrush, go to the typewriter, whatever their art of choice is. And that all feeds everything about the sort of artistic and human experience. It was such a sort of a pristine, crystalline example of why we do what we do and being
Hmm.
inspired by something. It was just a beautiful, beautiful moment. So
That's
I just wanted to share
incredible.
that. Just because it meant so much to me in that moment, and it sort of caught me off guard of like, oh, this is what happened. They
Hmm.
saw something beautiful and had to react with something equally as beautiful. And isn't that a lovely synergy of,
Hmm.
and an example of where art comes from? I don't know. I just loved it.
That is a great encapsulation of how art is in conversation. Just
Yeah,
as we live, breathe, and exist in the world, we create things. It's like the best version of the you saw something you liked and you wanted to make something.
right.
It's I've been rereading the Odyssey recently,
Mm,
and actually, sorry, the Iliad. And there's the word enthusiasm. It comes from to be in theos, I think, if I remember
yeah.
right, which is to basically be filled with the spirit, to be filled by the gods.
Okay.
And I think that good art enthuses us. We
Yeah.
are literally filled with this just urge to create. And I think that in a very base level, that is how we express something divine in some ways. In our own frail humanity, we want to create. And
Yeah.
that it's just incredible.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think maybe one of the other things that struck me is that I've also been like I come from like I was a punk rock kid, and
Hmm.
I'm used to reactionary art like a Rage Against the Machine song, so
Hmm.
something that's like I see something and I'm reacting to it, but in an angry way, and or
Yeah.
I need to speak out about this. Like I think that's where my default is. And then I saw this thing where it was just such this moment of beauty
Hmm.
and this little love story. I was like, oh, it really can go both ways. Because I've always lamented, it's like, again, like in the early 80s when all these punk rock bands are screaming about Ronald Reagan, you know, like where is that today? I
Hmm.
feel like if oh my God, if there's a moment tailor made for punk rock, it's right now. and why aren't people getting angry? Like, why isn't that on the charts? And people we're still listening to pop tunes and we're still trying to escape and everything. Like, and thinking like, okay, it can go both ways. Like you can be
Hmm.
inspired to be angry about something and speak out, but you can also be inspired by the beauty of something. That was kind of a nice reminder in my
Hmm.
cranky old man days. Like,
Well, this is not to tie it too much to this is why I've been hearing people talk about post Project Hail Mary, is that it's a reminder of optimism and hope in our art.
yeah, yeah,
And I really like the idea of trying to lean into that because I think that the world by default is a dark place and easy to be cynical because
yeah,
unfortunately noir fiction, even though it's heightened obviously, is a great example of people make bad choices.
yeah,
And it's really easy for the bad choices to just keep stacking on top of each other. But what about when the good choices are made?
yeah. Yeah, and look, I think again, like everything that I tried to do with the Carter McCoy series was to infuse the noir mindset, I think, with
Hmm.
a an overall sense of doing the right thing,
Hmm.
even when the right thing is the complicated thing.
Hmm.
I still think that Carter's motivations are come from a good place.
Hmm. And
Uh,
no, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, it's as messy as they might be, I think his
Hmm.
intentions are pure.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, because I agree with you. Like I struggle all the time. I mean, with I've done I'm about to release the third volume of a collection of short stories called Unloaded that I
Hmm.
started many years ago, which are I invite crime writers to write stories without any guns. There's no
Mm.
guns on the page or
Interesting.
off. And we donate all the proceeds of these things to gun control lobby
Hmm.
groups. Because I myself, like I'm very, I think the gun culture in this country is insane.
Hmm.
But like, what the hell am I going to do about it? And but this is so it's like it's a very tiny gesture and a tiny little way to sort of say, hey, look, we can do without these things, and the world doesn't fall apart. And with those of
Hmm.
us who rely on these things a lot for what we do, we
Hmm.
don't even we don't need them all the time. So like having a little bit of hope and a little bit of yeah, that we can make a difference here. It is very important to me in the face of writing about terrible people doing terrible things. Like I don't want to bum people out. They're if even and again and look, I think it's a big reason why people love a good mystery is because
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, the good guys win.
Hmm. I think that that is the interesting balance that I think it's fair to say I have grown up over the last like 15 years with the time where I think most that I know of where people are deconstructing heroes
Hmm.
and every hero sees the tragic end. We get this in our Indiana Jones, our Star Wars, our pick your big name property. We have to get the sad old version of them at a certain point,
Right.
is how it feels like it's been. And I think that there's a time and a place for it. I think it's a fascinating story to explore because most of the times, if you look at the Greek stories, guess what? They usually end in tragedy and heroes don't have happy endings. But I
Right.
think that we can have a place for stories with happy endings. And I'm hoping that we
Yeah.
can see more and more of those. Eric, speaking of happy endings, this has been a delightful conversation. I have enjoyed it thoroughly. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
Well, my website, ericbeatner.com, is periodically updated when I remember to do it. I'm on most of the socials. I just at Eric Beetner. I try not to hide myself too well. I'm easy to find. And look, I think getting a chance to talk about these, especially this final book now. This is literally my first interview that I've done about it. So I appreciate the chance to get to
Thank you.
talk about this and talk about Carter. And I've been really gratifying to see readers connect with him and relate to
Hmm.
him. And I really hope I did him justice in the end.
Hmm. It is a great send off. People should check out A Wound That Will Not Heal, linked in the show notes. Eric, I'll link everything you've got going on in the show notes. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.